I'm just gonna, as we start off, take a look back through the comments to see who's here. Hello, Nicolette. Hello, Corey. Hello, Robin. Hello, Chaps. Hello, Jerry and Diane, Mom and Dad. How are you? So welcome to another Friday Live. And this week, I had a long train journey today. And on that train journey, I was racking my brain to be like, what are we going to do a live about today? What do I want to talk about? What can I kind of prepare in this 4-hour train journey that I'm on? And I decided to talk about Napoleon. I have 2 pages of notes in my little notebook here. And I'm pretty sure the guy who was sitting next to me on the train was looking over my shoulder as I was writing these down and being like, what is she doing? Because they are, let's say, very scatterbrained notes. So what I want to talk today about is something that, like, when I was sitting on the train racking my brains about what to talk about, I thought of this and I was like, I've never really heard anyone talk about this. So I'm quite excited to talk about it. It's going to be a historical one today, if you haven't already gathered that. And what we're going to talk about is how Napoleon changed estates. So if I'm talking about estates, I'm talking about families who own a large estate, who own a large house, probably with a lot of servants. Think Downton Abbey. Think that kind of vibe of like a big house, a family that owns it, but then like a whole community of people that work there and are involved with the house itself. Because Napoleon pretty much like axed those. Napoleon was really the death knell of that type of estate. And we're going to talk about why. Because again, I had to do quite a lot of research on the train to find the ins and outs of this. And I already kind of knew about it. So I think that this is not like a very well-known thing. So let's go back to the beginning. As we've said many times on this channel, Everdeen was built in the year 1800. This was the very beginning of the Napoleonic era. Napoleon became the first consul in 1799. So he'd been, the consulate era in France was a Republican government. It was just after Robespierre and the real terror era. That is hard to say. In France with the end of the revolution and that whole time period. And Napoleon basically was being the sole ruler. He was not in charge in the way that a president or a king would be, but he was the person that was leading the Republican government from 1799 to 1804. So when Everdeen was built in 1800, Napoleon was already the guy in charge. He was on his way to being the emperor, and he was, had his hooks in the government already. I'm always surprised, by the way, by how Everdeen was built at that time, because it just seems like such a random time to be like, we're going to build a giant house. Like, the revolution has just ended. We beheaded all of the aristocrats. Let's build a massive farmhouse. So random. I'm glad they did, but, totally insane. So Napoleon is in power. Everdeen has been built. It's the year 1800. Things are going along towards emperorship. Eventually in 1804, Napoleon will become the emperor. And when Napoleon becomes the emperor, he establishes the Napoleonic Code. Now, mostly in the US, because I'm from New Orleans, the New Orleans area. When we hear about the Napoleonic Code, we think about, just before the Louisiana Purchase, when Napoleon was in charge, and we were using the Napoleonic Code in the US in New Orleans. It wasn't part of the United States of America, but was, geographically what is now the US. Napoleonic Code is something that we still have in France today. The Napoleonic Code is a code of laws that was drafted not by Napoleon, but by 4 judicial experts, but with Napoleon's support and with his oversight. And it was used during the Napoleonic era, but has continued until the modern day. And what we now have in France is called the Code Civil de France, the Code Civil, which we hear about a lot in France. And it's the Napoleonic Code. It's still here. It's still working. It's still in action. Obviously, it's been like massively reformed since, the beginning of the 19th century. But it's still kicking. So, it must have had some good points. It was terrible to women. That's something that I learned in my research today, which I was kind of deeply horrified. It basically said that women are the property of your husbands, which was bad. But the side of the Napoleonic Code that I want to talk about tonight actually was pretty good for women because, to my knowledge, it applied equally to women and men. And what we're going to talk about, which massively changed how estates were run and managed and existed, was the inheritance law that was in the Napoleonic Code. So, in the Napoleonic Code, there was a specific section that addressed inheritance law that said when a parent dies, their estate must be equally divided between all of their children. Now, up until this point, it had been primogeniture, like that's the oldest son inherits. And that's how these estates had continued through the centuries, because you have an estate, it's all in one piece, it's the money and the land and the house and the other properties, and then it's passed to one person, the oldest son. The thing that massively changed when this inheritance law was established was that it was no longer passed to one person, it was passed to a group of people, whatever the number of children that person who had died had. The estate had to be divided between them. And I cannot say for 100% certain this included women, but I did try to find out about this, but it was really difficult to find out. But I will say that in my research, everything I read said that it had to be divided amongst the children and not the sons. Oh, hello, Megan! You're here for the Napoleon episode. I just want to say quickly, a quick aside, that this episode is dedicated to the Megan Daly because of her love of Napoleon. So hello and welcome, and I'm glad that you're here for this one. So an estate had to be divided amongst the children. It did not say divided amongst the sons, so I'm assuming that included daughters. The thing that changed the world massively about this, which is what Napoleon intended in many ways, is that this broke up estates. So instead of having one person who was inheriting the entire caboodle, the house, the land, the money, everything, you had 2 or 3 or 5 or 8 or 10 people who were inheriting equal points. Now this left the inheritors with a couple of options. Option 1, you decide to, give it a go with your siblings as a group. You all get along really good. You feel like you can manage stuff together, and you're going to try to keep managing the family estate, whether that's just a house or perhaps a vineyard or perhaps a farm. And you want to, keep it as is and run it as a group, possibly even live there together. Option 2, you are the sibling who is really committed to this estate or whatever it is, and you want to buy out your siblings' shares. So you have to find some way to raise money, which is probably going to put you into debt, to buy out your siblings' shares. So even though you end up, if your siblings all agree, with the entire estate, you're already in debt. Option 3, you're a sibling who doesn't want to run this estate, but you sell your share to one of your siblings, and you end up with a nice chunk of money, but not what you would have had if you had been the sole inheritor. And you peace out and just go live your life in Paris and do what you want. You may have seen where the problem is. The problem is that this ends up with either a group of people trying to run a estate or a business, in the case of vineyards and farms, which obviously is going to be problematic. If you've ever tried to do anything as a group with your family, you probably understand where I'm coming from, because there are differences of opinion at times. Or you are in massive debt, but you're also in control of the state, but it's not the same kind of power you would have had if you inherited the whole thing wholesale from your parent. Basically, what this meant is that over the course of the 19th century, most of the family fortunes and estates collapsed. Most of them just broke apart. They were divided amongst too many people, and there just weren't the big houses with a full complement of servants, a full complement of people working in the fields and running what's called there's a word I'm trying to remember. that people who rent a house from an estate and then spend their life farming and renting that house. But it just that way of life kind of started to die out. It would later die out in England more in the 20th century, but in France it kind of took a turn after the Napoleonic Code. And what that means today is that a majority of chateaus, of large houses, of estates are either broken into many pieces. So, for example, Everdeen was a farmhouse, and now, although the barn and the abandoned house and some of the outbuildings are still attached to the farmhouse, which is the bundle that I bought when I bought, I didn't get acres of fields. I didn't get farmland. I didn't get, a huge estate because of the Napoleonic Code, because of how it forced large estates to be broken apart. What it also means, and this was something that I discovered today that I thought was very interesting, is that vineyards in France have changed massively, especially in Burgundy as well as Champagne. There are a lot of vineyards that are small, like almost boutique kind of vineyards that are family owned, but they're very small. And any bigger vineyards you find are generally like a corporate thing because families have sliced off as they were, as they had these financial and inheritance problems caused by the Napoleonic Code. They slice off a bit for themselves. This sibling says, "Oh, I'll take my 1/5 of this vineyard and do my own thing," and the other 4 siblings sell to blank whatever, fill in the name of big wine manufacturer. So it's massively changed the winemaking industry in France. The other thing that's massively changed, which you can see in person if you're in France and you just walk around a small village, is that there are huge numbers of abandoned houses. This is a slightly more modern issue because it's taken a couple hundred years to kind of result in this. But if you walk around like the village where Everdeen is and any of the villages in the region, you'll see just tons of empty houses just standing there. And you look at them and you think, oh, like if they don't want to use this house, why don't they sell it? Well, if you have 4 siblings, maybe one sibling wants to keep the house, maybe one sibling wants to sell the house, maybe one sibling wants to restore the house and then sell it for a profit. You have a lot of differences of opinion. And so there's a lot of cases where people have inherited a property from their family, but cannot agree on what to do with it. So it just sits there empty because no one can agree, oh, this is what we want to do. Let's invest. Let's do this. Let's sell it. Let's do this. No one can agree. So the property just sits there totally empty. It's always remarkable to me if you just walk around the village, if you're walking around our village, how many places are just empty. And it's a little sad, but here's the cherry on top of this whole historical cake. Right now in France, the government is passing some laws where it's going to be a lot easier with permissions, with building permits, with government support, with things like that, to restore an old house than to build a new house. And if you Laurent's parents are actually dealing with this right now because they own an old barn that they're trying to decide if they want to get the permission to potentially renovate it, because right now there's a thing where if you have an old building that is not zoned to be residential, like an old barn, for example, you have to declare if you are interested in potentially making it residential in the future. And if you don't do that right now, it's going to be kind of your last chance for at least a few years. So basically what we know from this is the government is trying to make a push towards getting people to renovate old houses and to decide what to do with an old house that is abandoned versus building a new house. So I'm really supportive of that. I think that's a really, really good thing. And I fully support renovating old houses because that is what I'm doing with my life. But it's something that I feel extremely privileged to be doing, not just because, I'm able to have this house and to have a nice place and to use it for what I want to use it for, but it just feels like a privilege to be like the person that fixed this, the person that changed this so it's better, the person that, brought life into this house in some ways. Because something that I've been very clear about since I bought Everdeen, and I think is very important to keep in mind, is that like you're not an owner, you're a curator. You are a caretaker for a certain amount of time. This house has been around since way before I was born and will be around way after I'm gone. And it's something that I'm just taking a part in. It's not the end all and be all is not with me. I am a part of the house's story. The house is not a part of my story. Although I guess it is also a part of my story. But I love that maybe there's a push happening for more people to discover that, because it's a really special thing and I really like it. Anyway, thank you guys for staying with me through this lecture on the Napoleonic Code and the Napoleonic era. I really had fun researching this and finding out about it, because I knew that there was that inheritance law, and that it had a big effect on how life has turned out in 19th, 20th, and 21st century France. But I thought it was really fun to learn a little bit more about it in depth. And I hope you did too. And if you guys, oh, hello, Tammy. I didn't see you there before. Oh, Megan's impressed by my research. I was very, very thorough on my train research. Yes. But I'll hang on for just a minute if anybody wants to make a comment. Or, oh, Nicolette says I liked it. Thank you, Nicolette. Thank you, Tammy, too. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I need to do more history ones like this. It's really fun. It's really fun. I'm a giant nerd. But please do, if you guys enjoyed this, hit subscribe, hit like, leave a comment. Tell me what else you would like to learn about, because like I'm looking for ideas. And I don't always have a train ride of 4 hours to ponder my ideas on. So any suggestions are highly appreciated. And I think that I'm going to leave it there for the evening. So I will see you guys on Monday. Oh, Lori says, wonder about your relationship with your neighbors. I should talk more about my neighbors, because my neighbors are fantastic. My neighbors are all so nice. We have 4 neighbors that are like relatively close, and every one of them is just extraordinarily nice. And obviously one of them are the family of Simba the cat, who is amazing. Simba the cat is just an exceptional cat. So yeah. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. I will see you guys on Monday, same time, same place. And have a good weekend, and I will see you then.